بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Surah Al-Imran, verse 104. Let there arise out of you a band of people inviting to all that is good, enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong. They are the ones to attain felicity. I'm greatly honored today to be able to talk to you about a topic that's taken most of my thinking time. And I've given it the title, To Be or Not to Be, That is a Question, because it's a very interesting quote. It's one that everyone seems to know. Even if you don't read Shakespeare, even if you haven't heard of him, you seem to know this quote. And it's really interesting because Shakespeare didn't circle this quote in his play and say, well, could you please remember this one quote for me? We chose to remember this quote because we understand, or will understand hopefully, the significance of it. It comes from Shakespeare's tragedy called Hamlet, and it's regarding Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. The Prince of Denmark's father, King of Denmark, is killed by the uncle, and the King of Denmark's ghost appears to Hamlet and asks him to take revenge for his death. And people who study Shakespeare talk about how all Shakespeare's tragedies, every hero in Shakespeare's tragedies, has a flaw in his character. And many people say the flaw in Hamlet's character is his indecisiveness. He can't seem to make his mind up if he should kill his uncle or not. And if he does want to kill his uncle, why does he take so long to do it? And this quote really sums up why he takes so long. And I'll read the quote for you, a bit more of it, to understand the context. He says, "To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them? To die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks." And there's really two main interpretations of this quote. One is that Hamlet is comparing between life or suicide. So he's saying, should we live with this life, with all its pains, with all its troubles, or should we just end it and commit suicide? But there's another interpretation I want to look at, and it says that actually Hamlet is comparing between life and life. In life, you can either be someone, you can either do something, you can either make a change, or you can just live, but really not be living, really be as good as dead. And instead of just revenging the death of his father, he's thinking about, is it right for me to take revenge or should I not? And this is the crux of my talk today. Is it worth it? Should we try and make a change in this world? Should we take it upon ourselves to right every wrong in this world? Or should we take the maybe easier path and just live on the fringes of society, do what is good for us and ignore everything else? And I move on to my first point, the individual. And there's two main points here. Firstly, for us to know what is wrong in society and to understand how to improve it, we need to, of course, firstly educate ourselves. And I won't dwell on this topic long because there's ample hadiths and verses from the Quran and talks regarding education. And really, it's very clear for us that it's our responsibility to educate ourselves. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلمة." Seeking knowledge is obligatory on every Muslim man and woman. So this is, of course, a clear point. We need to educate ourselves. Second point is, we need to stop complaining. We can't keep pointing out the problems in society and saying, why is this like this? Why is this happening? Look what they're doing. These problems aren't alien. They don't come from outer space. They come from us. We make up society. So the second point is that we need to change ourselves first in order to be able to change society. There's no point in pointing out what's wrong and having that wrong in us first. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in society. And really, the individual is the starting point. I can look at it from a different perspective as well. How can we educate ourselves? We can use what we already have. We can use our types of worship to improve ourselves and create different characteristics in us to make us better humans. And instead of just praying and doing the movements, we can work out some sort of improvement from that and improve ourselves. And I'll quote a small part of a speech Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra says about worship, alayhi salam. And she says this speech when she realizes the land of Fadak is going to be seized from her. And she starts off with a short philosophical talk, and then she talks about how every type of worship has an improvement to a type of character in us. Instead of saying you need to pray because God said so, rather she says, God said you should pray because it improves you. And I'll just quote a few. She says, so Allah made belief to be purification for you from polytheism. He made prayer an exaltation for you from conceit. Alms a purification for the soul and a cause of growth in substance. Fasting an implantation of devotion. Pilgrimage a construction of religion. Justice a harmony of the hearts. Obeying us, Ahlul Bayt, management of the nation. Jihad, a strengthening of Islam. Ordering goodness, Amr bil Ma'ruf, for public welfare. And really this is the last point that I want to dwell on, the public welfare, Amr bil Ma'ruf. It's not just there because God said so, it's there because it helps us. All these ibadat, all these types of worships, they're there because they help us, they improve us as human beings. Which leads me on to my second point. Well, some of you might be thinking, I pray, I fast, I'm overall really good, don't do much wrong, so I'm on the right way, I'm on the right track. You are on the right track, but that's not enough. We can't stop there, we can't stop at the individual. These characteristics need to be built in us, and then they need to radiate from us to our society, from us to our family, to our communities, to our societies. We need to make an effect with them. We need them to be a source of goodness from us to outside us. I'll just give a small example. Hijab. Hijab essentially is just a piece of material. It's just a piece of cloth, like any other piece of cloth. Why is it so important, and how can it be made so important? It's when it's used to improve us. It's when it's used as a good example. If I wear a headscarf and I don't do anything else, and if I see something happening wrong in the road and I just turn a blind eye, haven't I changed this hijab, this great thing, into just a piece of material? It's not benefiting me in any way. So for us to move to a next step, we need to be able to use everything in our powers to improve ourselves. I go back to the first verse I quoted, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ صدق الله العلي العظيم. Let there arise out of you a band of people inviting to all that is good, enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong. They are the ones to attain felicity. So from this we see that it's not just enough to improve ourselves, it has to move from ourselves to the community. When we see something happening that's wrong, we can't just ignore it or just complain about it or just point it out. We need to move forward to right it. We need to be able to say, this is wrong, I'm not just going to sit here and complain about it, I'll do something about it. And I'm just going to quote a short passage from a book called Ethics and Spiritual Growth by Syed Mohammed al Musawi. And really it's an excellent book to read, an absolute joy to read. I'd recommend it to everyone because it really sums up this point in a very eloquent way. And this paragraph is enough for us to dwell on. It comes from chapter 6, and he says, man is not merely a living organism, but the bearer of the universal message of goodness, wisdom, beauty, and human worthiness. On the contrary, the absence of such a spirit in individuals and groups is a sign of backwardness and lack of social maturity. Their indifference, unconcern, and lack of the sense of moral responsibility are symptoms of a psychological disorder and sickness as much as they are marks of social immaturity. They do not perceive the relatedness of their own lives to the happiness and welfare of others. Such a society resembles a ship sinking in a storm at sea where everyone tries to save his own life. And that's what's usually happening. We find it easier to complain about what's wrong and then ignore it and then pretend it has nothing to do with us and then just leave it alone. It might go away, it might not, but it's nothing to do with us. And that's the problem. We need to take an initiative. We need to say, that's wrong, I'll do something about it, I'm able. And which leads me on to my third and final point. The answer that often comes back to me is, okay, I hear you. Okay, that's right, what you're saying is correct. We'd love to make a change, lots of stuff wrong, let's make a change. But the reality is, you're not going to make a change. As much as you try, you're not even going to dent it. This is how the world runs. This is how the world goes around. You're not going to change anything. Do you think you can do anything, you individual? No way. This is how the world is. And that is the worst point. because we see so little ourselves, we think so little of ourselves that I'm so little, I can't change anything. Of course, all of us can. All great people in this world, or nearly all, were absolutely normal people like you and me, who just stood up and said, this is wrong, I'm going to change it, I'm going to do something about it. And every single one of us can achieve the same thing. We don't need to think of it on a big scale. We can start with ourselves, our families, our communities, our societies, our local areas. We can make a difference. Worse than just complaining is when we turn a blind eye, we pretend the problem's not there. We see something happening that's wrong and we just say, it's nothing to do with us, we don't want to interfere, it's their life, it's not ours. It's their problem, it's not ours. And that's even worse. Sir Ian Kershaw, who's a British historian of the 20th century, he said, the road to Auschwitz was built by hate, but paved with indifference. Auschwitz was, as we know, the famous concentration camp of Nazi Germany. And it's really interesting how he puts it into perspective. It was paved with indifference, with this idea that it's not my problem, it's none of my business. That's even worse, when we ignore the problem and just let it multiply and become bigger and worse. Imam Ali alayhi salam said, من ترك إنكار المنكر بقلبه ولسانه ويده فهو ميت بين الأحياء. He who abandons forbidding what is wrong theoretically and practically and is indifferent while seeing vices committed is a moving corpse among the living. And really that's my point. To be or not to be. Do we make a difference? Do we take a step and try and make a difference? Or really are we just going to live a small happy life, content with ourselves? But really, is that a true life? Is that a real life? Is this how God intended us to live our life? We need to criticize. Of course, we need to complain. We need to criticize. But then we need to also move to improving it. We need to point out the illness and then cure it. The importance really is in the action rather than just the talk. And I don't want to make it sound as if it's all doom and gloom and it's all bad and we're not doing anything to improve the situation. We are. There's lots of excellent examples in our community where people, just like you and me, are taking initiatives, are building small groups, are pointing out problems and then working to solve them and improving the problems. Really, there's really good examples in our community. What I'm saying is we need to take it on ourselves as individuals as well. And I just want to point out one example of such an initiative in our communities, in our areas. This group I found out about during Muharram when they were giving out leaflets for first aid. And I went and read up a bit more about them. And the work they've done is absolutely amazing. I'm talking about SEMA, the Student Iraqi Medical Association. And I've just been reading up about them. And the excellent stuff. Well done, really. Really good stuff. They've pointed out problems, they've worked to solve them, they've really taken it upon themselves, and they're made up of students like you and me. They're made up of normal people from our communities, from our areas who want to improve the situation. And any one of us can do that, but we need to make the initiative, we need to take that. We need to say, it's my responsibility. It's funny how we pray, we fast, we do everything, but we think that becoming a Muslim is just a name. When you become a Muslim, you have to take on the responsibility with it. When you wear a headscarf, you have to take on a responsibility with it. We are humans and we are Muslims. On both contexts, we need to take the responsibility to improve the areas around us. And one way of doing so, I'd encourage everyone to try doing this. 1 week work experience with MPs, absolutely amazing. Because you find out what's wrong in your community, what's wrong in your area, you're able to find out how the MP is improving it. If not, hold them to account, they work for you. You try and solve the problem, move to solving it, move to working something out to solving it. If we try to solve the problems in ourselves, our families, and then move on to our societies, we can eradicate the problems one by one. And please don't think you're too little or you're too insignificant to make a difference. All of us can make a difference. Any one of us. And I think it has to be clear, the link between this topic and today, since we're commemorating the 40th of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He should be an example for us. These are the examples our religion has given us. People who said no, people who decided to take it upon themselves to change. They didn't just ignore the problems. Imam Hussein didn't just say, well, you know what, be realistic, I can't beat him, I can't kill him, it's not going to work. I can sit on a corner and just let it go by. No. He said no. And he took a stance and he took an initiative to change something. And we remember him for this for hundreds of years and still many to come. This is what we need to try to do, each person, for themselves, for individuals. And I think it's quite clear now that really it starts from the individual, but it has to work out to outside the individual. It has to work out to the community. It's not enough to just stop at the individual. I'd like to end with just a small quote from the supplication of Friday from As-Sahif As-Sajjadiyya. And it's just a small prayer so that we can pray together. Let us pray together. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. O God, make me firm in Thy religion, as long as Thou keepest me alive. Make not my heart to swerve after Thou hast guided me, and give me mercy from Thee. Surely Thou art the giver. Thank you very much for your time today, and thanks for letting me talk to you about this topic. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين